Good afternoon to everybody joining us today. Thank you so much for attending today's webcast, where we're going to be talking about the evolving strategies that cyber attackers are using to make lives difficult, but more importantly, how you can prepare ahead of time. My name is Mary Owen, and I'm going to be helping out our hosts today. They are David Corlett, who is the Director of Product Management for VIPRE Security, and Christoph Bertrand, who is the VP of Product Marketing for Arcserve. So as we're going through this presentation, we would love to hear your questions. I'm sure you're going to have a ton of them. So please send those to us using the questions section of the interface, and we will get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the event. We also have some resources loaded, which are available for you to download, so just check those out. Today's session is also being recorded, and we'll be sending out an email shortly to the email address you registered with a recording of this, so you can watch it at your leisure. So now, with that out of the way, take it away, David.
All right, thank you, Mary, and thanks for everybody for joining us today. So before we get rolling, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew who VIPRE Security was. We've actually been in the field of security for over 20 years. Although you may know us from back in the day as Sunbelt Software, and then we were acquired by a larger entity called GFI. We had some early products like I Hate Spam, Counter-Spy. We created these very early on to fight what was then emerging adware and spam and things like that. And that moved forward. We produced our own malware analysis sandbox called Threat Analyzer. Then we released VIPRE Antivirus, the very first version of VIPRE Antivirus in 2008, and so on and so forth. About 3 years ago, we were spun off from GFI. We're now an independent company, about 80 employees, and we produce a portfolio of malware protection products for the endpoint and for networks and basically businesses that want to protect themselves. So where we are today, our current antivirus solution leads the market in terms of our detection rates and our low false positive rates. If you look at AV Comparatives is a good independent source for antivirus reviews. They do a really good test of about 20 antivirus products, running some live malware samples against it. We won their top rated security product in 2016, and we're doing very well this year as well. We expect to hope to do so again, at least. We have about 39,000 active customers today, about 6 million endpoints under management, and over 3,000 partners. And then, of course, we have our back-end analysis technologies that we use to look at malware samples as they come into our organization. We process about 1 million malware samples every day that we collect from our customers and some of our industry partners using our own sandbox technology. And in total, we collect about 1 petabyte of malware samples total, and we use that to train our machine learning engines and things like that. So massive quantities of malware that we use to learn about how to protect our customers. Okay. So with that behind us, let's just get into what's happening in the world today. And I'm just going to start off with, I spoke about how we collect malware samples. And if you look here, we got 2 charts. The one on the left shows all malware samples in blue here. And what's notable about this is you can see that somewhere just around the middle of 2015, there was a significant and very dramatic uptick in just the quantity of malware that we were collecting on a daily, weekly basis. And that has continued. It's kind of bounced up and down, but we're seems to be settling in. It's still increasing, but we've just seen a major increase in malware traffic or malware samples collected just in the last couple of years. Now, the red line at the bottom of that chart indicates ransomware specifically. It's pretty insignificant percentage-wise, but if you zoom in just on the red line, you can see that starting a little bit later, again, a little bit late 2015, but then really in 2016, just massive jump in the quantity of malware samples that we gather. As I mentioned, total malware about 1 million samples a day, and 5 to 10% of that now is ransomware, typically. So massive growth in the last couple of years related to just the raw malware that we collect. And I thought we could take this theme, what happened in early 2015 compared to kind of where we are today, just to give you a kind of a comparison of where we were and where we are today. So just starting off with, in 2015, we collected about 600,000 samples per day maximum, and now we're up to over 1 million on many days. Ransomware-wise, we had about 8,000 samples collected each day. Now we're up above 30. Total breaches didn't increase as much. Of course, we're not to the end of 2017 yet, but definitely more breaches in 2017 than we had in 2015. But now compare that to the actual number of records compromised. These are things like your authentication credentials or your social security information, credit information. Less than 1 billion in 2015 and well over 4. We're easily on track to have over 4 billion compromised records in 2017. So massive growth just in terms of the threat that we're seeing across the industry. Now for ransomware specifically, ranked 22nd in terms of the overall, if you look at ransomware versus other kinds of malware like Trojans and other kinds of threats, viruses, and so forth, ransomware is way down on the list in terms of prevalence. In 2017, it's now 5th on the list. And in fact, in healthcare specifically, 72% of all attacks appear to be attributable to ransomware. So again, major growth for ransomware, even relative to other kinds of malware. And in terms of infections per month on average, we saw about 30,000 infections, individual systems infected per month. In 2015, that's now jumped to 200,000. And in cases like when WannaCry came out, way more than that, even just a week or two. So the other thing to note, what the ratio here refers to the number of small companies that are impacted versus the number of large companies that are impacted. And what we're trying to show here is that the ratio of small to large companies increasing, meaning more small companies are being targeted by ransomware in 2017 than in 2015. In 2015, it was more the big players, the large organizations like Anthem Healthcare and things like that were targeted by ransomware. Whereas in 2017, we're getting some democratization of ransomware attacks, unfortunately, and we're kind of moving down market as things get more automated and easier to use. And just some subjective results. All this data, by the way, comes from a number of online sources, the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. So good hard numbers behind this. But there's also some subjective analysis. So for example, last year we saw impressive innovation in ransomware technology and extortion methods. So we're seeing more techniques used as part of the overall ransomware package. Criminals began offering ransomware as a service, enabling anyone to extort their favorite targets. So what we're seeing here is not just sophisticated criminals using ransomware, but even people that aren't very computer savvy going and basically renting ransomware from these criminals and then targeting whoever they want. And then perhaps the most significant change to ransomware in 2016 was a swing away from individual consumer systems for targeting vulnerable organizations. And again, starting at the larger ones and now working their way down market to small and medium-sized businesses. Now, backing this up, there are a number of exploit kits that are used as tools to build ransomware. And there have been several of them that are popular, but what we've seen is that as we collect all these ransomware samples, we can tell which kits are used to create that ransomware. And in 2015, the most popular kit for ransomware authors was Angler, and it had a whole set of features, things like obfuscation of code within the ransomware, anti-sandboxing, anti-VM techniques, so trying to detect the presence of sandboxes or VMs or AV. Those are things that are trying to detect the ransomware, so it's avoiding those. Masking of URL patterns, browser fingerprinting, and so forth. So it had all these features for creating ransomware and ways to avoid detection. Well, now the most popular kit in 2017 is the RIG kit, and it has all those features and a bunch more. So much more sophisticated evasion techniques. It's using the Tor library for post-infection command and control, and it's doing things like local network scanning and exploitation. So folks that are trying to create ransomware today can use this kit and create much more sophisticated evasive ransomware than they could even just a couple years ago. Now, the evasive techniques are across the board. Polymorphism is now becoming commonplace, obfuscation of the code, encryption of the code embedded within the ransomware. They're using things like domain generation algorithms to randomize the command and control URLs that they go to get their next set of instructions. It used to be that we could collect a list of those URLs and just make sure they're blocked. Well, now they're algorithmically generating those URLs. It makes it much harder. And all sorts of other aspects of evasive techniques that malware designers are using today. Now, if we think about how attackers get into organizations, by far the most common threat vector is email. And you know all about this, right? This is your classic phishing email. Social engineering, try to get a user to click on either a malicious attachment or a malicious link. And that is often then followed by that link going to some kind of malicious network content, which might be a malicious website. Or it could be not involve the email at all. It might be a direct, malvertising. You go to a website and all of a sudden you're getting something in your browser, or a direct protocol exploit. So a bunch of different techniques, sometimes chained together. And then these typically then also lead to infection of the endpoint. But that can also happen through infected media like a USB stick or a compromised device that happened at home and someone brings it into the office and lo and behold, it's on your network and trying to compromise other systems. So we have a variety of different vectors, attack paths that these malware designers are trying to use, and they can start to chain these together. And in fact, the Verizon report abstracted a lot of this. They said they kind of looked at the most common patterns, and they came up with this idea of it starts with phishing. Our user John, unbeknownst to him, he clicks on this link, which isn't a link to pictures from the company Picnic. Instead, it's a link to a website that has malware on it. That gets downloaded as a dropper, gets plugged into his system. It goes and grabs a bunch of other modules from Command and Control Server and other sites, and then it starts to attempt to spread internally. So it's using local network attacks to target other systems within the environment. WannaCry is a great example of this. Started with a phishing email, you click on it, infects your local system, and immediately starts to scan your local environment and attempting to use the Eternal Blue SMB exploit to spread within an organization. So again, a variety of techniques, much more sophistication, much better evasion techniques, and then chaining of these techniques and automation of these techniques to get into an environment and then spread within that environment. So what are the lessons we've learned from observing how ransomware has evolved over the past couple of years? And you might have heard, some vendors are saying things like, antivirus is dead. Well, what does that even mean, right? Well, what we think they mean by this is that the classic techniques of signature-based detection for ransomware are now becoming much less effective, right? The threats today are employing multiple attack and spread techniques, multiple different ways into the system. So if all you're doing is scheduled file scans using signature-based antivirus, you're not going to catch a significant percentage of attacks. You'll still catch a lot of stuff, but there will be things that can get past that kind of technique. So we really need to be aware that we need to look at all the transmission vectors we talked about, email, network, and right on the endpoint, and we need to use tools that can look at the spread of malware within an environment, that can use sophisticated advanced detection techniques and then figure out how things are spreading. We also know that there are active strains of both this kind of prevalent malware that we can find with signatures and zero-day and even fileless malware that we've never seen before. WannaCry, when it first surfaced, nobody had ever seen it, so the signature engines just didn't detect it. You really require a much stronger advanced detection technique, usually based on machine learning, to catch this new form of malware. So you need advanced, efficient, and redundant backup, complementary detection engines at different layers to catch all the different threat types that we see in the market today. Malware is adopting alternative monetization techniques. So what we're here to talk about today is preventing malware from getting to the point where it's infected your system. And if your system is infected with ransomware, one of the things you can do is just restore from backup. That's great, and that works a lot of time, but we have started to see malware doing things like threatening to publish your sensitive information online instead of just not giving it back to you. And so you need to be thinking beyond just backup. You need to protect systems even when they're off a network and when they can't be protected with some kind of online cloud-based AV only. So actually, before we get to this slide, what we'd like to do is to take a quick poll because we've talked about all the nightmare that's out in the world today. So could we bring up the poll, please? Okay, so the poll is this. Oh, no, actually, it's what keeps you up at night? And what we'd like to ask you is, of these four options, what do you think as the biggest challenge you face? What keeps you up at night, in other words? The first one is that attackers may be on my system. The second is if I have the right security in place to protect my environment. Third one is not enough funding to properly protect my environment. And the fourth is that my users will let something into my environment. So what's in your mind kind of the biggest challenge, the thing you're most concerned about when you think about protecting yourself and your organization from malicious attackers. We'll just give you a few more seconds to answer. Okay, and then let's go to the results. Okay, interesting. All right, so most people, 61%, more than 61% said you're worried mostly about your users doing something not smart, perhaps. We'll put it that way. Next on the list would be if I have the right security in place. So you guys are not confident in the tools that you have today. Okay, and then that attackers may be in place already, and not enough funding come in around 15%. Interesting. Okay, so what's interesting to me is that those results actually correspond pretty well with the results of a survey that we sent to our 39,000 customers. Over 2/3 of respondents said they thought their business would be shut down, at least temporarily, at least for a couple days, if they were hit by a significant cyber attack. 60%, almost 60%, said they don't have good security dashboards to know what their current state of security is. And 65% thought it would take hours or even weeks to remediate threats. And furthermore, adding all this up, we get to about $55,000 in average cost for an SMB responding to a cyber attack. That's a large cost for most organizations. Don't want to have that happen to us. So what can we do to protect ourselves? Well, let's go back to how attackers get in, and we'll take that kind of canonical pattern we've seen, an email that leads to some kind of network downloads that ends up compromising an endpoint. And as I said before, the signature-based detection techniques we've been using, for the past 20 years, these are just not good enough anymore. Yes, they can catch a lot of the prevalent, well-known forms of malware. We're going to find a piece of malware. We're going to create a signature, have some people look at it, maybe use a sandbox to analyze it, create those signatures, push it out. And we can automate that to some degree. But there is a delay, for that signature to be created and published back out to our endpoints. So we need a solution that's faster than this that can catch the zero-day and those unknown threats, the fileless malware and things that we can't catch using signature-based techniques. And this is where dynamic behavioral machine learning engines that can detect zero-day threats comes into play. And here we're looking at malware that's revealed through its behavior. What does it actually do? For it to do something malicious, it has to do something malicious, right? So we can watch what processes do. When they take action that looks malicious, we'll go ahead and stop those processes and report that as malicious activity. And then if we can identify it's related to a file sample, then we can go ahead and put it into our signature systems so we can catch it earlier and faster, but it protects us against these things that we've never seen before. Now, what we know is that people that have quote-unquote antivirus, probably classic signature-based antivirus in place, there is still some risk there. And for those that did have antivirus in place, those guys still were infected by this type of zero-day threat. So we need to use this to help protect ourselves. Now, what do you look for in tools beyond just the what kind of engines are there? So first of all, you want to be looking for things that reduce the time you spend configuring and managing complex tools. And so what we've been doing over the last several years is simplifying the administration of your security solutions, making it really easy to set up, easy to manage. If you want to create policies, super easy. All the data you need is right there. Make it simple. Next, you need to have a complete picture of your current state of security. So you need good security visibility, right? And this is here where VIPRE's dashboards and visibility heads-up displays will give you a broader and deeper view of your computing environment. We'll show an example of that in just a moment. Third, make sure you don't have any coverage gaps. So another common issue is someone brings their own device in, or they turn off their agent, or they do something. You all said you're worried about or 60-some% of you said you're worried about your users doing something boneheaded, right? Well, that's a coverage gap. They might turn something off that's protecting them. You need to know when that happens so you can quickly and easily fill that gap. So this we call operational efficiency. And last but not least, the most advanced and accurate protection that you can get at a reasonable rate. And that's where this machine learning engines and threat intelligence come in to give you that kind of protection. Okay, so that leads us to 3 best practice tips in order here. And the first one we'd say here is user training and system hardening. Really the first thing you need to do is make sure that your systems are well prepared to defend against malware. Hardened, so they're not brittle or too easy to get into. And this comes down to training your users, because most attacks, most email attacks, for example, require a user to click on something. So the more you can train your users somehow to not do that, the better. Unfortunately, what we've heard from surveys and other sources is that only about 14% of companies actually do this kind of training. And of course, we reinforce this behavior. How often do you send a link to your colleagues saying, "Hey, click on this and you'll achieve nirvana"? Well, that's training them to click on things. If instead you have an intranet portal where you put those links and people know to go there manually and then find what they're looking for, that's a better approach than sending them links in email. Second sub-item here, keep your systems patched and securely configured. Now, we happen to include patch management directly within our product. It's part of our agent technology we use on our endpoint protection solution. And that's because we think patching and keeping systems up to date is just as important as the kind of malware protection you have with our actual scanning of files and monitoring processes and things like that. So patch management, very important. And if you don't need that flash anymore because it's been deprecated and now we're trying to get off of it, go ahead and get rid of it. If it's on your system, it's a vulnerability, right? So anything you don't need, get rid of it. Now, the best practice number 2 is where the malware detection and monitoring and blocking comes in. So usable layered security. Now, I've talked about our endpoint security solution. As I said, it's top rated. It's got advanced internet and web protection. We use a combination of signature-based and machine learning-based engines, both for file scanning and process monitoring, but also just on the network. We have an IDS built right in. It does email anti-spam, and also, as I mentioned, has patch management, some device control encryption, and so forth. So a holistic solution right there for your endpoint. But the visibility of your endpoint solution, of course, is limited to that endpoint. So we also provide solutions for monitoring that inbound email specifically before it even gets to the endpoint. And then even a raw network security, looking directly at your network data, your network packets, carving files out of download streams, FTP and HTTP, sticking them in a sandbox, executing them, and seeing if it's malware, even, again, before it gets to the endpoint. So with these 3 solutions, we're providing that multiple vector protection with that layered approach of signature-based, supplemented by machine learning approaches to protect you from attackers. And just as a quick example, if you look at our recently launched VIPRE Endpoint Security Cloud solution, this is where we roll up intelligence from all our different engines. So a dashboard shows you how many threats have been quarantined and your top 10 threats and the severity and top 10 compromised systems. But this is a summarization of data from our advanced protection, our process monitoring engine, our web engine, our email engine, our scanning engine, our firewall, and so forth. So it all rolls up into one place, giving you that across-the-board security visibility. The other aspect of any good system is going to be it will allow you to demonstrate the value. So it's going to summarize the importance of your health and your security posture and things like that in a way that you can use. And this, again, is from a VIPRE Cloud product. Anything you see in these emails, you can drill down on. But this is also a great thing to bring to your management and say, hey, here's what our solution is doing to protect us. We blocked 216 threats. So demonstrating the value is another important part. Proving that it's actually doing something for you is an important part of any solution you choose. And then the last thing I want to mention in terms of protection and the platform you use to protect your endpoints from malware is trusting the platform. And what we mean here is that there's been any number of cloud solutions launched over the past 2-3 years in the antivirus space, but not all of them are equal, right? You're looking for a trusted cloud provider. And to help out with this, we partnered with Amazon. We're now an advanced technology partner. We had their top engineers review our architecture. We know that it's redundant, it's scalable, and it will be with us for the long term. And you're also looking for things like how good is a vendor support, and can they actually work with you as a partner going forward. Okay, and then last but not least, the best practice number 3, if all else fails, you do need a really good backup and recovery solution. And that's where I'm going to turn it over to Christoph with Arcserve to tell you about their solution.
Thank you very much, David. And well, scary statistics, and it's absolutely incredible what's going on these days with all of these attacks. And I'd like to spend some time telling you how you can recover from those. Something we'll go through at some point, and we can help. So Arcserve, very much like VIPRE Security, has been around for many years. We are also a very similar path, independent again. It's been about 3.5 years and have many customers around the world. We have solutions that range from software to appliances to also cloud-based solutions. And I'll spend some time on this today. What I'll do too is I'll spend time showing you how some of our customers, other users, have successfully defeated ransomware attacks and leveraged their backup and recovery technology provided by us to do so. One of the things I'd like to do also is think about, the fact that you're going to need resources, you're going to need to train yourself. We have a great site for you, and it's ransomwarewatch.com. VIPRE and Security and Arcserve are founding members. It's a place where you can go find a number of resources to educate yourself, formulate plans, and get answers to some of your questions around ransomware. So where we come in, Arcserve is the backup and recovery piece of the equation. Just think of it this way. A ransomware attack is a logical disaster, okay? Essentially, it's very much like data corruption. It makes your systems and or associated data unusable. In the space of backup and recovery, there are two dimensions that we care about very much, which are recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. So the recovery point objective is essentially how many backups do you have, how many versions, and how far behind are you when it comes to time to recover. You would be asking yourself this question if, say, something came up, you have to shut down one site, for example, because of the malware attack, and you have to fail over to your recovery site, maybe run from there, or at least after you've cleaned up the infection, recover the data from a good backup, one that has not been infected, or one that you know how to go fix should you have identified the issue or the executable and remove that before you relaunch in production. Point being is, how far behind are you? And how quickly you get back on your feet is the recovery time objective. So I will give you some statistics also, and I've just reconfirmed these at a recent event with one of our other partners on ransomwarewatch.com. The average time it takes for an organization to get back on their feet in the mid-market, so not necessarily the largest of enterprises, although we've seen some pretty bad cases recently, but in general terms, it's going to be anywhere between 28 and 32 hours. So I usually take 30 hours as the operative number, if you will, in that it may take you 30 hours before you can resume full service after a bad ransomware infection. Now, that should give you pause right here, because I guarantee you that your management does not think that's okay. We live in a world of immediate gratification with portable devices, iPhones. We want everything. We want it now. And there's very little understanding sometimes that it is not easy to recover from a disaster, a logical disaster, and specifically a ransomware attack, because you have so many activities you have to orchestrate. Let me give you an example. And I have about 5 examples today for you. The first one is and David mentioned the healthcare space being a primary target with, I think, 72% of attacks, and that doesn't surprise me. I actually have more than one example in the sort of health space. So this is an example of a medical center that has multiple sites, and their focus is senior citizens. They also provide, and it's typically senior citizens with mental health type of conditions, so obviously very vulnerable population, and certainly where services are needed daily and are very critical. And that's also why healthcare is targeted, because it deals with people. So remember, you're dealing with criminals. They'll try to go after the money, and they really don't care. So this case is interesting in that there was an incident response that was initiated at 8:30 a.m. in that morning when this happened. So I want to point you here to the fact that it's incident response. They work in this case with one of our service provider partners, so somebody who sells our solutions to these end users. And they called them and said, look, we have a problem. the problem probably started before, but the incident, the clock started ticking in terms of the recovery and the remediation aspects at 8:30 a.m. So in this case, they were able to very quickly identify the issue and literally in about 3 hours got this facility back on their feet after removing the Word attachment that had a macro in it. So not very sophisticated, this one, but guess what? It was an email, as David indicated. That's probably how it's going to happen to you. And somebody clicked on that document they shouldn't have, and that executed a macro that started infecting the environment. So the good news is that because they were able to quickly identify the issue and block its spread, it's spreading too much and too quickly, they only had to do a file-level recovery directly into the folders that were affected. So they literally went in, removed the files that were infected, and recovered the files back from our solution. That's essentially a very small attack. That's not a massive attack. That's one that's caught quickly, one that you can fix quickly. It still took 3 hours, okay? Luckily, in this case, this was not dealing with transactional type of environments or specifically medical treatment type of systems, so definitely an administrative headache, but not super critical. Still, that could have been a lot worse had it spread further. Another one, which is a mechanical organization, so really a company with a vast geographic network that covers a region where they deliver essentially plumbing and HVAC type of services. So lots of moving parts, lots of people to schedule, people who are on the road, inventory to manage, many transactions, many customers, you name it. And they were targeted here and infected in the morning, 10:30 a.m., which in many cases when you're infected in the morning, it can be a good thing because it gives you access to personnel to get things fixed. They were able to again recover the data very quickly. In this case, it was actually a PC. And because the organization is not necessarily very, very large, but it's also, from an IT perspective, relies a lot on PCs, this was actually very critical to their business, and it slowed them down significantly. And they literally had to wipe that infected machine altogether. They were lucky because it did not spread to other systems. Still, it took them a few hours to get things back on track. Here, they're very lucky. Simple infection, small infection, still took 3.5 hours, 4 hours to get things back on track. And they lost a couple of files that had not been backed up because the backup happened before the files were created. And then a third one, before we get into some best practices, and we'll talk more about other examples, another healthcare one. And again, we're getting these examples, and they're very hard to get because, as you can imagine, our customers and end users don't necessarily want to share too many details, and certainly we will never give you names. But I can promise you that we spoke with each of these customers. Another one in the medical space. Again, statistics are just what they are. This was a very interesting one because here you had a mid-sized medical clinic. We had an attack that essentially was a little more sophisticated in that it tampered with the administrative accounts and then also locked up files. So essentially, this was another phishing example that then essentially allowed the ransomware to gain access to the network. And they essentially got to the point where the data was held for ransom. So they got into the whole scenario with Bitcoins, etc. One of the things that I want to point out here is how you design your network is going to be critical. This here was facilitated, this infection was facilitated by the fact that there was an exposed network share, and those are really the perfect breeding ground for those type of attacks, because essentially as they are shared, it's easy to get into that share, encrypt everything and then access a bunch of different systems and encrypt them as well. The time it took them in this case was not as good, as favorable as the other ones, which were simple infections. It took them about 2 days in terms of loss of productivity and loss of time. They didn't lose any data. They were lucky. They were back up and running in 36 hours, which is right at the edge of what the the typical attack is when you have good backup, when you have a good team ready to jump in, and literally they had to repopulate a lot of machines from their backups, and that's why it took so long. The partner in question who worked with this end user had to physically seed the environment back in person, and they copied some data as well on removable storage from the backup to go back and into the premises of the customer. So the point I'm making here is this. Here's a company that has a great service provider, an organization, I should say. Here's an organization that has a backup that's certainly in very good shape. They have personnel. They identify the attack reasonably quickly. It still takes them 36 hours, okay? And about 48 hours to stabilize everything. So as you can see, as you think about ransomware and what it does, it really begs the question of, do you have the best backup and recovery solution in place today for this type of attack? Because it will happen to you. And what about other issues that could happen? So let's talk about some best practices and where we can help. Before we do that, and before I go into the Arcserve UDP platform, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, I'd like to ask you a question. We have a poll coming up. So let's bring up the poll. And I would like to ask you, what do you feel your level of confidence is that you could recover your data? And I will say your data and systems, really, should you be hit by ransomware? So pretty simple question. Please take a couple of seconds and click on the answer that best fits the question. And by the way, this is anonymous, so feel free to answer in confidence. Let's take a look at the results and see where we stand. Okay, so this is great. You have a high level of confidence overall, which is good. However, I see that about a third of you are not confident. So that's also very interesting. It means there's probably a lot more testing that needs to happen. For those of you who are extremely confident, 10% is actually what I was expecting. I'll tell you why. You are probably in an organization that tests its disaster recovery, and you've probably been hit before. So I would say this with a smile here, but yeah, you know what you're doing, and that's great. For very confident, very interesting number. I certainly hope you do regular testing, and that's one of the things that I can only stress out, and also the leveraging cloud platforms as part of your strategy. Great. So let's get back into the presentation here. I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes on talking about the Arcserve UDP portfolio, just to give you a sense for what it does. It's a very comprehensive solution that provides data protection, archiving for email, disaster recovery, traditional backup. We cover a variety of platforms, virtual, physical, and we really allow you to get enterprise class type of capabilities, but with a lot of simplicity. It's a very simple and easy to use solution. So we really combine this small team, IT team usability with enterprise grade functionality. So take a look at this. It looks like all of a sudden you have a very complicated, everything's interconnected. What is this solution? It must be difficult. Well, here's the point. This shows you how easy it is to take data from one site and replicate it to multiple locations with Arcserve UDP. Whether you have a primary site on the top right that you're backing up locally for your first line of defense for data protection, Maybe you're working with a service partner and you replicate to that location. You have branch offices potentially on multiple sites. As you've seen, we had a couple of examples of customers with multiple sites, and you're backing up locally, you're replicating your data, or maybe you'd like to go to the public cloud and leverage an Amazon or an Azure as part of your strategy. The point I want to make here is that we have a hybrid solution here that allows you to back up locally to disk and also go to the cloud. You can, again, pick a public cloud environment if you already have a relationship and if that is part of your strategy. I will also say, and we'll cover that in some best practices, that having a distant copy in a different site with different security parameters is a very important part of successfully protecting against ransomware. So we have also an offering that's called Cloud Direct, which, as the name indicates, allows you to back up directly to our Arcserve cloud. In this case, it's not a public cloud, it's the Arcserve cloud, and we can allow you not to have essentially any equipment. You would just go straight from the virtual machines or the servers you're protecting directly to our cloud, and we can provide you a backup service or a disaster recovery as a service where you can invoke in our cloud those virtual machines that may have become unavailable and also recover from the cloud or take over a local IP address, whatever the case may be or the use case may be. This is a great way to complement what would be a traditional approach where you back up locally first and then onto another location. So these two options give you a very complete set of strategies against ransomware attacks, maybe for your decentralized environment, if you're in the retail space or you have agencies, you can use a direct-to-cloud solution where we help you with the backup and the disaster recovery service. And in other cases, you may want to have a local backup, of course, as a first copy, and then other copies into the cloud and recover locally. So you have options. And that's really what I wanted to stress out here. So let's get into some of the best practices, a couple more examples, and try to give you, again, additional best practices because there's always quite a bit that needs to be taken care of. You've heard extensively today about the fact that you need to protect endpoints in the source machine, and I think you heard so much from David, and you saw all of these statistics. I don't need to emphasize this further. I will just say this, though. The regular backups is absolutely necessary. If you care about the data on those machines, whatever the machine is, whatever the server is or the virtual machine is, if you care about the data and it's critical to your organization or your business, you have to do regular backups, maybe even consider continuous data protection. Snapshots every 15 minutes or continuous data protection where literally, data is continuously protected. These are some of the things you have to think about. There's also this 3-2-1 strategy, which essentially says you have to have multiple copies, multiple locations, and always keep one data offline so it can't be touched or accessed. I think there are variations around this theme. This is more of a generic view of it, but the point I'm making here in the context of cloud as well is, look, you can't just have one place where you have backups. And you'd better have multiple copies of this backup and multiple versions of it, and you'd better have a location that can be affected. And look, it's not just ransomware; it could be something else. But if ransomware hits you, you want to make sure you can go to a secondary site or through a service provider to go either run your business from or to get the data back so that hasn't been affected. Also remember, as you go work with a cloud provider, a service provider like ourselves, the different security protocols are in place in those data centers. Those are very, very hardened facilities, whether public cloud or data centers, and they may have and they will have different characteristics and profiles as your own facilities. And while you may get attacked, it's very unlikely your backup facility will be attacked at the same time and certainly not the same way. And remember, backup files are just that. They are not executed. So even if you back up an infected file, it's not going to execute and ruin your whole backup. Just want to point that out. I know it's a question we'll probably get. So again, make sure that you can leverage availability capabilities like virtual standby, which is the ability to stand up a virtual machine either on site or in the cloud. This is something that we've seen our customers do very successfully. So here's another example, and I'm going to talk about a publishing business. It's actually associated with university type of environment. I will not mention their names or where they are, but in this case, our customer supports hundreds of users, and it's a publishing business. So again, think of it as a large university type of environment, and they have a publishing business that's associated with it. It's actually pretty important for the funding of the whole organization, but it's a real business. And in this case, the corruption came in through the old photo zip. So this is an example from a couple of years ago. It was one of the first ones, 2.5 years ago, for one of the first ones that really got our attention. And of course, as David mentioned, and as I will repeat, you have click-happy end users, and they will click on something that they shouldn't. In this case, the photos.zip was an infected file. It was a barred virus, which did a lot of damage in its time. And in this case, the customer luckily had a 7 a.m. backup. And it's important to know when the backup happened, because that's the RPO here. Well, it was luckily only a few business minutes. So it wasn't so bad. I don't think they had even opened the actual business when that started spreading. So in this case, they were very successful in blocking the attack. It took them a lot of time, though, 28 hours, so slightly better than the other examples I showed you, which were in the 30-plus hours. In this case, because this was the first time, this was very new, and they had never really been exposed to anything like that, they certainly were very happy that it worked, and our end user, so the user of our solution, even got a letter of commendation from his CEO. So he certainly was very happy. And when is the last time that the backup guy was the hero? And I can tell you that day was the day that he got that letter. So very successful results here. But again, I think it can be better. You could really get